Anger rarely comes with warning. One moment the mind is calm, the next it is on fire. A single insult, a mocking laugh, a careless dismissal, and suddenly the air feels heavy, the body stiffens, and the urge to strike back takes command. The pulse pounds in the temples, the breath shortens, and the chest tightens as if preparing for battle. Anger claims to give strength, yet the experience is one of being seized, driven, even enslaved. We know this cycle. The smallest spark ignites a blaze, and once lit, it spreads faster than reason can contain. The danger lies in how quickly the shift takes hold. You walk into a room clear-minded, but one sarcastic remark cuts across the air, and your thoughts spiral. You drive home relaxed, but a reckless driver swerves into your lane, and your hands clench, words of rage forming before you even notice. You share a meal in peace, until a careless comment from family pierces pride and turns warmth into cold silence. What began as trivial becomes monumental, not because of the act itself, but because of the storm rising within. Marcus Aurelius warned how swiftly impressions invade, and how easily the soul, when unguarded, becomes their captive. Everyday life is filled with these ambushes. The driver who endangers you on the road, the colleague who makes a cutting remark in front of others, leaving you exposed, the partner who forgets a date you held close to your heart. Each moment is ordinary in scale, yet inside it grows monstrous. What is minor outside becomes unbearable inside. The provocation is real, but the intensity is born in us. Here lies the real struggle, not with them, but with ourselves. The Stoics insisted that insult, provocation, or neglect lie beyond our control. What matters is the reception we give them. Marcus Aurelius asked daily, "What is within my power? What belongs to me?" His reminder was necessary because the temptation to surrender control is constant. The insult belongs to the one who utters it. The interpretation belongs to you. To forget this is to live at the mercy of others. To remember it is to reclaim freedom. This insight may feel unnatural, but it is the key. The driver's move is only metal in motion. The colleague's words are sound carried on air. The forgotten date is a lapse of memory. None of these inherently wound. The pain arises when we add our own verdict. This is disrespect. This is rejection. This is betrayal. Once judged so, the fire burns hotter. In truth, we suffer not once but twice, first from the event, then from the story we build around it. Marcus practiced stripping impressions bare. He asked, "What exactly happened here?" A gesture, a word, a moment of forgetfulness, nothing more. To pause and examine is to cut the fuse before the explosion. The insult dissolves when revealed as empty noise. The neglect loses sting when seen as human weakness. In this stripping, reason returns and anger weakens. Thus, the real enemy is not the act of others, but the false story we create around that act. Anger thrives on untested stories. Wisdom begins when we stop them at their roots. From here, the next question follows naturally. If stories fuel the fire, how do we master the narrative itself? That is where Marcus directs us, toward the deeper discipline of mind. Modern neuroscience and ancient philosophy converge on one truth. Anger is less about what happens than how the mind interprets it. The 90-second rule, often cited by neuroscientists, illustrates this clearly. When a trigger occurs, the body releases stress hormones. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the bloodstream, heightening alertness, quickening the pulse, sharpening the senses. Left alone, this chemical surge dissipates in about 90 seconds. But what usually happens? We do not leave it alone. We replay the event, we feed the story, we fuel the flame. Instead of passing like a wave, anger grows because we choose to nurture it with thought. This is where the mind becomes its own enemy. The body's storm is temporary, yet the mind insists on adding fuel. We replay the cutting remark, the slight, the betrayal. Each replay strengthens the sense of injustice until anger is no longer a passing surge, but a sustained state. Marcus Aurelius would call this a failure of judgment. The event has ended, yet we prolong it by clinging to our interpretation. What could vanish in seconds becomes a burden we carry for hours, sometimes years. Beneath every burst of rage lies what might be called an emotional button. These buttons are rarely created in the present moment. They are pressed into us by earlier wounds. Memories of disrespect, fear of rejection, insecurity about worth. All these leave marks. When touched, they awaken more than the current irritation. A coworker's sarcasm stings, not only for today, but for the childhood moment we felt humiliated. A driver's rudeness irritates not only because of danger, but because of the old sense of being invisible. What seems like sudden fury is often layered upon older vulnerabilities. Marcus would remind us that anger is frequently a mask. Beneath its loudness hides something fragile, hurt, fear, or embarrassment. Anger is easier to display than fear. It feels stronger than shame. Rage presents itself as armor when the truth is that it protects a wound we do not wish to expose. This is why anger can feel powerful yet hollow. It is a shield hiding weakness. To confront this honestly requires courage. The Stoic does not deny the hurt, but refuses to let the mask of rage dictate action. Here lies the critical Stoic insight. The true cause is not the other person, it is the inner narrative we tell ourselves. The judgment that interprets an act as intolerable is our own. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The insult does not wound unless we judge it unbearable. The neglect does not poison unless we interpret it as betrayal. We are injured less by others and more by the stories we attach to what they do." When we see this clearly, responsibility returns to its rightful place within. The choice is not whether others will provoke us. They will. The choice is whether we replay their actions endlessly or let them pass like clouds. Neuroscience tells us the surge will fade in 90 seconds. Stoicism tells us the story is ours to stop. Between them, the lesson is plain. Freedom comes not from silencing the world, but from mastering our judgments. This understanding leads naturally to the next question. If the root problem lies in the stories we create, how can we train ourselves to step back, to resist the reflex of judgment, to see clearly before reacting? Marcus Aurelius himself wrestled with this, and his method was not suppression, but observation, reframing, and deliberate choice. That is where we now turn. Anger feels sudden and overwhelming, but Marcus Aurelius would insist it is never unavoidable. The surge of emotion may strike, yet the reaction that follows belongs to reason. Between stimulus and response, there is a pause, and in that pause lies freedom. A driver cuts you off in traffic, a colleague mocks you, a stranger insults you online, a partner forgets what mattered to you, a child resists your guidance. In each case, Marcus would stop, examine, and act with clarity rather than rage. Take the traffic incident. The reflex is instant. The horn blares, curses rise, hands tighten on the wheel. Marcus would first strip the impression bare. A car changed lanes, that is the fact. The story, they disrespected me, they endangered me, is judgment layered on top. What would he do? He would steady his breath, remind himself that safety is preserved, and continue driving calmly. The action is restraint. Focus on controlling the vehicle, not the behavior of another. Take the workplace jab. A colleague speaks with sarcasm in front of others. The instinct is retaliation, to defend pride. Marcus would remind himself that words are vibrations in the air, not wounds, unless we consent to call them wounds. What would he do? He would either remain silent, letting the remark dissolve in its own emptiness, or respond with calm clarity, refusing to match insult with insult. The action is composure. Preserve dignity through steadiness, not anger. Take the online insult. A stranger posts cruelty, seeking to provoke. The natural pull is to argue, to defend. Marcus would examine it. Letters on a screen, light on glass, nothing more. What would he do? He would read once, ask if there is any truth, and if not, move on without reply. The action is disengagement. Deny control to those who know nothing of your character. By leaving it unanswered, he keeps his peace. Take the forgotten anniversary. The first feeling is hurt, quickly disguised as anger. They don't care, they don't value me. Marcus would separate fact from judgment. Forgetfulness is weakness of memory, not betrayal of love. What would he do? He would choose conversation rather than accusation. Express calmly that it mattered, listen without venom, and seek understanding. The action is communication. Speak the truth of what is important without letting anger fracture the bond. Take the resisting child. Disobedience provokes frustration. They disrespect me. Marcus would remind himself that immaturity is not malice. What would he do? He would correct firmly but without shouting, set boundaries clearly, and demonstrate through his own steadiness what discipline looks like. The action is patient correction, discipline without cruelty, guidance without rage. In all these cases, the Stoic pattern is the same. First, strip away the false story. Second, remember what is within your control. Third, choose the response that preserves reason. Marcus would not deny the emotion's presence, but he would deny it authority. He would take practical steps, breathing, pausing, observing, speaking calmly, withdrawing when needed. Each situation becomes a chance to practice virtue. Patience on the road, dignity at work, indifference online, honesty in the home, firmness in parenting. This is why Marcus wrote so often to himself, to prepare for what was certain to come. He expected insult, neglect, and disobedience. By expecting them, he was never surprised, and by practicing philosophy, he was never enslaved. His way shows us that anger is not removed by suppression, but by understanding. The insult, the slight, the careless act, all become tests. The right action is always within reach if we choose reason over reflex. At the center of Stoicism lies a radical principle. No one can harm you unless you permit it. Harm, for the Stoics, is not in insult or injury, but in corrupted judgment. If someone strikes you, your body may suffer. If someone mocks you, your reputation may falter. Yet your mind, your ruling faculty, remains free unless you yield it. Marcus clung to this truth. If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. The fortress of the mind, for him, was the only ground worth defending. From this perspective, emotions are not raw forces imposed from outside, but constructions born within. They arise from interpretation, not from the act itself. An insult becomes offensive only because we judge it so. A neglect becomes intolerable only because we demand recognition. The mind paints events in darker colors than reality requires. To alter the judgment is to alter the feeling. A shift in interpretation can transform rage into indifference, injury into training, humiliation into discipline. This is philosophy in action. Not escape from life, but mastery within it. For more Rage Shortcut, I want you. Here the observer self becomes indispensable. Marcus practiced the art of watching impressions without fusing with them. He sought to cut the chain between event and judgment before it hardened into reaction. By observing, he created distance. This is an impression, nothing more. He urged himself to strip away the legend that encrusts things, to see only what is, a sound, a gesture, a word. No venom, no catastrophe, no hidden curse, unless the mind adds them. Observation weakens illusion, and with it, anger. Consider a modern example. A colleague interrupts you in a meeting. The reflex is irritation. They disrespected me. The Stoic practice is to pause and ask, what is this in truth? A voice speaking while I wish to speak. Nothing more. The sting vanishes when stripped to its essence. By refusing to attach the story of insult, you stop the fire before it begins. This is not suppression, but clarity, a decision not to be deceived by appearances. Or take the case of online criticism. Someone posts a cruel remark designed to provoke. Without judgment, it is pixels of light on a screen. With judgment, it becomes offense. The Stoic response is to read, test whether there is truth, and if not, release it. To grant it power is to enslave yourself to a stranger's ignorance. To withhold assent is to keep freedom intact. Stoicism also roots this principle in impermanence. All things fade, anger, insult, even life itself. To rage at what dissolves by nature is folly. The person who mocks you will soon be dust. The reputation you defend will vanish into obscurity. Even your own body will wither. Marcus often reminded himself, all is ephemeral, both memory and the object of memory. What remains, what endures, is the use of reason in this moment. To tie your peace to what vanishes is to guarantee turmoil. To anchor it in judgment and virtue is to secure stability. This impermanence is not despair, but liberation. If anger fades, why nourish it? If insult dissolves, why feed it power? To remember the brevity of life is to see how little such things weigh against the whole of existence. The Stoic turns awareness of mortality into perspective. Only what shapes character matters, and character is always within your command. Thus, the true fortress of the Stoic is not built of stone, but of choice. Judgment belongs to you. Response belongs to you. Character belongs to you. No insult can breach it. No betrayal can storm it. Even in a world of provocation, sovereignty of mind is untouched unless abandoned. And this naturally leads to the next lesson. If harm is only in judgment, then the task is to train the mind to withdraw that assent. Mastery lies not in silencing others, but in disciplining ourselves, to choose reason over reflex, truth over story, clarity over confusion. This is the next step Marcus presses us toward, daily practice in guarding impressions so that no sharp word or careless act can enslave the soul. From Marcus, we derive practices as concrete as they are timeless. His philosophy was not abstract speculation, but a manual for daily living. Each principle he recorded in his meditations was written to be used the next morning, in the heat of ordinary conflict. These practices remain as relevant now as when he first wrote them. First, identify your triggers. The Stoic does not walk blindly into battle. Know the specific situations that spark disproportionate rage. Perhaps it is the reckless driver who cuts you off. Perhaps it is the colleague who interrupts, or the family member who criticizes. Marcus would remind us that these moments are not random. They follow patterns. By mapping these emotional buttons, you prepare your defense. Just as a general studies the terrain before the fight, the philosopher studies the mind before the provocation. Awareness does not eliminate anger, but it weakens its ambush. You are no longer surprised, you are ready. Second, establish boundaries. Not all battles are worth fighting. Some words are better left unanswered, some provocations ignored. Marcus withdrew often, choosing silence when engagement would only deepen hostility. This is not cowardice, but wisdom, protecting your energy by refusing to be dragged into endless cycles of provocation. In modern life, this may mean not replying to an online insult, stepping back from an argument that has lost direction, or declining a conversation when emotions run too high. The Stoic knows that energy spent in vain is energy stolen from virtue. To say no is often to preserve the freedom to say yes to what matters most. Third, adopt the timeout protocol. When the surge feels overwhelming, step away. The Stoics valued pauses because the first wave of anger is the most dangerous. Marcus wrote that impression strikes suddenly, but judgment is always within our power. Creating space interrupts the reflex. Step outside, breathe, or write down what you feel. These small acts reclaim freedom. They remind you that while the body is flooded with chemicals, the mind can still choose its course. In the pause, you remember what belongs to you, reason. Without the pause, you are swept into reaction and regret. Fourth, respond with honest vulnerability rather than the mask of anger. Anger is often a shield for more fragile feelings, hurt, fear, or shame. Instead of shouting when hurt, acknowledge the wound. I felt ignored. I felt overlooked. Marcus would have seen this as an act of courage. To admit vulnerability is to live truthfully. To hide behind rage is to live in disguise. Anger conceals, but vulnerability heals. In relationships, this practice strengthens bonds. Instead of escalation, there is understanding. Instead of distance, there is repair. The Stoic chooses truth, however uncomfortable, over pretense, however loud. Finally, treat each difficult person as an opportunity. Marcus wrote, "The obstructive becomes the productive. The difficult colleague, the impatient driver, the dismissive family member. These are not only irritations, but trainers. Just as muscles grow under resistance, the soul grows under irritation, if we choose wisely. Each encounter with difficulty is a practice ground for patience, discipline, and inner strength." The Stoic reframes hardship as exercise. To despise the trainer is to despise the chance to grow. Together, these practices form a discipline, both practical and profound. Identify triggers, and you disarm surprise. Set boundaries, and you protect your energy. Take timeouts, and you reclaim freedom. Speak with vulnerability, and you reveal truth. Treat others as trainers, and you transform irritation into strength. These are not lofty ideals, but concrete actions, steps anyone can take daily in the most ordinary of settings. This is why Marcus still speaks with authority. He does not tell us to eliminate conflict, but to meet it with reason. He does not promise a life without insult, but a mind that refuses to be mastered by it. The practices are clear, but the choice is ours. Do we surrender to reflex, or do we guard judgment? The answer defines the quality of our day. And this leads naturally to the next reflection. Why is Stoicism, with its quiet discipline and relentless focus on judgment, not only a personal remedy, but a social necessity? If individuals can master anger, what does this mean for families, workplaces, and communities at large? The answer lies in how private discipline becomes public peace. Our age brims with triggers. Social media thrives on outrage. Workplaces hum with competition. Families fracture under stress. To live without mastery of anger is to be endlessly at the mercy of circumstance. Burnout, broken relationships, and constant turmoil are the results. The world does not need to invent more conflict, it already surrounds us. What we need is a way to meet it without being consumed. Stoicism offers such a counter-system. Observe, choose, act. Observe impressions without surrender. Choose the judgment that aligns with reason. Act in accordance with virtue, not impulse. This structure, deceptively simple, transforms daily life when practiced consistently. It shifts power away from external noise and back into the hands of the individual. In families, this practice reduces conflict before it grows destructive. Instead of retaliating with harsh words, one partner pauses, examines the impression, reframes it, and speaks honestly. "I felt hurt when you forgot" is far more constructive than "you never care." Anger escalates. Vulnerability invites repair. By following the Stoic sequence, observe, choose, act, the cycle of resentment weakens, and bonds strengthen. At work, where ambition and rivalry often fuel hostility, the Stoic remains steady. Gossip spreads, credit is stolen, tempers flare in meetings, but the Stoic observes the impulse to lash out and does not assent to it. He or she chooses a judgment rooted in reason. "This situation tests my integrity." The action that follows is clarity, calm words, measured response, or sometimes silence. In this way, professional dignity is preserved, and energy is not wasted on petty contests. Online, the challenge is sharper. Platforms are designed to provoke outrage, to reward reaction. Every scroll risks encountering insult or provocation. The Stoic remembers, These are pixels, not chains. By observing impressions without surrender, they choose not to hand control of their mind to strangers. They act by scrolling past, or by responding only when truth, not ego, is at stake. In this way, digital life becomes less a battlefield and more an arena for practicing restraint. Hardship itself becomes training ground. Every slight, every frustration, every insult is a weight to be lifted in the gymnasium of character. Marcus wrote that the impediment to action advances action. Resistance is not an obstacle, but a tool. Over time, resilience grows. What once shattered composure now barely stirs it. The angry driver, the careless colleague, the rude neighbor, all become trainers. To resent them is to miss the chance to grow. To embrace them as practice is to become strong. This training is not selfish. Its benefits radiate outward. Imagine families where members practiced restraint instead of retaliation. Arguments would cool before they burned relationships beyond repair. Imagine workplaces where rivalry did not devolve into sabotage, but became opportunities for honesty and professionalism. Productivity would rise because energy would no longer be wasted in hostility. Imagine digital spaces where fewer voices fed provocation and more voices embodied composure. Outrage would diminish, dialogue would increase. At the social level, the implications are profound. A community of Stoics is not a community without disagreement. Conflict remains, but it is handled without violence. Offense is not denied, but it is not exaggerated. Instead of escalation, there is dialogue. Instead of vengeance, there is justice. In such a society, the heat of passion gives way to the light of reason. Communities would grow stronger, not by eliminating difference, but by refusing to let difference become destruction. In this way, Stoicism is not a relic of ancient Rome, but a remedy for modern fragmentation. It does not depend on historical context, nor on cultural fashion. It rests on the unchanging fact that human beings suffer most, not from events, but from judgments. To master judgment is to master life, and in an age of endless provocation, nothing could be more necessary. This prepares the next step. If the personal discipline of Stoicism carries such public consequence, then the path forward is not only self-mastery, but cultural renewal. The question becomes, how do individuals practicing restraint seed peace in families, workplaces, and societies at large? That is where the Stoic vision extends beyond the self, toward the common good. Anger is not defeated by suppression. To merely bottle it up is to court explosion later. Suppressed anger festers, it poisons thought and eventually erupts in destructive ways. The Stoic way is deeper, to understand its roots, to see it clearly, and to choose a wiser path. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that mastery lies not in controlling others, but in governing ourselves. No one owns your mind unless you hand it over. This is the radical promise of Stoicism, that freedom is internal. A tyrant may bind the body, a rival may injure reputation, but only your judgment can enslave the mind. Anger, when left unexamined, is precisely that enslavement. You react not as a free being, but as one driven by another's actions. To refuse anger is not to deny humanity. It is to insist that reason, not impulse, rules your life. To live this way is to walk free. You meet insult with composure, not because it fails to sting, but because you refuse to give it power. You encounter betrayal without collapsing into vengeance, not because it is trivial, but because you will not allow another's failure to dictate your state of mind. The refusal of anger is the refusal of slavery. Marcus said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." In these words lies the blueprint for resilience. This is not numbness. The Stoic does not advocate indifference to life. He advocates clarity. It is the strength of choosing reason over reflex, compassion over vengeance, clarity over chaos. To feel anger rise and then to pause, examine, and replace it with understanding, that is power. It is not weakness to step back. It is courage to refuse the chain of reaction. Imagine family life under this discipline. Criticism still comes. Disagreements still arise. But instead of shouting across the table, one person pauses, reframes, and speaks with honesty. I was hurt by those words. The argument dissolves before it destroys. In the workplace, gossip and rivalry remain, but the Stoic refuses to answer in kind. The dignity of measured silence speaks louder than anger ever could. Online, where provocation is constant, the Stoic remembers, these are pixels, not chains. The insult passes without conquering the mind. Each act of restraint is not denial, but construction. It builds character, the way weights build muscle. Every time you resist the pull of anger, you strengthen the ruling faculty, the reasoned part of the soul. Over time, the gain is visible. You no longer break under pressure that once seemed unbearable. The insults that once ignited fury now pass like wind. The betrayals that once shattered confidence now become teachers of patience. This practice is personal, but its effect is communal. A person who masters anger contributes to peace in the home, stability at work, and civility in society. If enough people practiced this discipline, violence would diminish and dialogue would replace outrage. The Stoics' refusal of anger is not withdrawal from life. It is the way life becomes livable for all. If this vision resonates with you, join us on Sophoria. Subscribe, share your reflections in the comments, and help spread the Stoic spirit in a world that needs calm more than ever. Your story of wrestling with anger may be the reminder someone else needs. Together we can make Stoicism not just a philosophy of the past, but a practice for the present. The work begins within, but its fruits extend far beyond.